Hello. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. I'm having a hard time with my video.
Hey, Julia.
Oh, yep, that's my fault.
Julia.
I'm on it. Sorry
I'm
about
sorry.
that.
I don't know what's going. I'm the committee chair here. I am sorry to keep you all waiting. I just I'm glad you can hear me.
Counselor, Carrie's just setting up because we didn't have enough time to transition.
Okay.
So it's just gonna be a few more minutes.
And you should be able to enable video now. Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. We are superheroes here. The central staff has been working back to back. So please forgive us while we get ourselves ready to go. That's right. I can be heard. No one can silence us here. Looking forward to this conversation. Okay. Wow, we have 32 people. Great. Okay. While we wait, just a few little housekeeping tidbits. When it is your turn to speak, I will name you so that you're just ready to go. You'll put your, you'll go off mute. So that way you won't be surprised. And we ask that everybody remains on mute until it's their time to speak.
Hello.
Hello.
What else is here?
We have a full house here.
You're busy.
Yes, I know.
Two hearings back to back.
And that I'm the chair of. It's
Yes.
The pressure. And this
You're
one,
doing a fine job.
this one, I'm the co-sponsor of this one too, so I'll be multitasking. But I'm gonna put Ed Flynn to work here. This is gonna be,
Yeah.
he's gonna have to work a little bit harder than me this one around. He already turned his camera off already. Look at him. Flynn, I'm putting you to work here. Don't even try to act like you don't even know me, okay?
I'm going to try and do this from my deck outside. I haven't been out all week, so I need to get some sunlight.
Yep.
I'll see you later.
It's beautiful. I will see you outside. Okay.
All right, Madam Chair, we are live on the web. We're streaming to YouTube, and once you're ready, we'll hit record. I know we're still waiting for the Haitian Creole interpreter, but other than that, we're pretty much all set and ready to roll.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie.
No problem.
And just wanted to again acknowledge and thank Central staff for all of their hard work and dedication through this process, transitioning into this virtual reality. And then today's hearing being facilitated in multiple languages with interpretation and the whole 9 yards speaks volumes to the amount of work that the team has put on to make this happen. So I just wanted to, before we even get started, just let you know, Carrie and Udeliz and the whole central staff team, how much we appreciate your hard work behind the scenes. I know we've been having lots of back-to-back hearings, and you guys have just kept keep going with it. So greatly, deeply appreciative of all your hard work.
No problem at all. Thank you for that. We appreciate it, and we look forward to making it all come together.
Yes. So I just have to give a few little housekeeping tips here. We do not have a official gavel. So I was going to, in the interest of celebrating my Dominican roots, use a plátano, but I couldn't find one. So I'm gonna gavel in this hearing with an empty water bottle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, I am Counselor at Large for the record. Here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I am City Councilor at Large, Julia Mejia, the Chair of Committee on Civil Rights. It is Friday, May the 15th, 2020, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on Docket 0640, Order for a Hearing Concerning Language Access and Information Parity during the COVID-19 outbreak. This hearing order is sponsored by the District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn and myself. The docket was referred to the committee on April the 15th, 2020. The council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom in accordance with the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibility while adhering to public health accommodations and ensuring public health through adequate alternative means. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/citycounciltv. It'll also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, Verizon Channel 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.civilrights@boston.gov and will be made in part for the record and available to all counselors. This interpretation available in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cantonese, and Mandarin during this public hearing. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a globe button. You can click the globe button and select the channel and the languages you would like to listen to. You can also turn off the English channel if you do not want to hear the original audio in the background. Today's hearing is on Docket 0640, an order for a hearing concerning language access and information parity during COVID-19. And I'm reading this all over again. And I'm going to now recognize my colleagues in the order of arrival. We are joined by, I'm going to my chat so I can see the order of arrival. Councilor Flynn, Councilor Breeden, Councilor President Council Janey, Councilor Edwards, and Flynn from District 2. There is a little lag here for some reason, and I need to have multiple things happen here. Let the interpreters, the language interpreted. Let the interpreters say the part. Yes, we're going to ask the interpreters to please say the interpretation. So I'm going to have Carrie, if you can help me out with this, or you, Dailies.
Hi, this is Julady. If we can have the interpreters just say that we have the available channels, that would be great for the people who are following along and don't speak English, so they can understand what you just said before moving to the channels.
Thank you. So we'll go with the first interpreter in Spanish, please. Hello? If the Spanish interpreter can please make the announcement.
Hola, buenas tardes, soy Gabriela Herrera. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Soy la intérprete de español para esta audiencia. Si alguien aquí presente necesita escuchar la audiencia en español, por favor opriman la cajita de español o Spanish que va a aparecer en la pantalla y ahí escucharán mi voz diciéndoles todo lo que está pasando en español. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Okay, we're going to go to Haitian Creole next, if the interpreter has arrived.
Yes, I have.
Okay, excellent.
Bonsoir, nom se Livy, sou bezwen interpretasyon. Nou gen yon kal peze, gen kote ou ka peze ki make haïtien, kreol haïtien, ou ka peze sou se pou katande m ka pale, ma tradu pou. Merci.
Merci. Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the Cantonese interpreter, please.
大家好，咁今日咧，我哋係會有廣東話翻譯㗎，咁亦都係現場直播。如果大家係想聽廣東話翻譯，咁請你喺屏幕下邊，你會見到有個好似地球儀嘅鍵掣，咁你咧只係要按嗰個鍵掣，咁你就會見到寫住中文，咁嗰個咧就會係廣東話。咁多謝大家 ，thank you。
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the next translation in Mandarin, please. Hello, the Mandarin translator, please. If you could introduce yourself and read the statement for language interpretation.
您好，我们现在是会有这个国语翻译，国语翻译，大家请在这个屏幕下会看见有一个键盘，然后呢，国语翻译将会在这个 German 德国的这个台，你会可以收听。好，谢谢。
Thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge that my colleague at-large Counselor Flaherty has joined us, as well as at-large Counselor Michelle Wu.
今天这个会Michelle Wu 也会来参加，还有费联议员也来参加的。
And
I don't know if, Madam Chair, I don't know if she said my name.
No. Yes, so that was a mistake, Counselor Flaherty. She's not going to be translated during the whole process. I think that was just a one-time situation. And I want to acknowledge that, Counselor Flaherty, I did mention your name. I'm sorry if you missed it.
No, thank you. I didn't hear it interpreted, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I also want to acknowledge that Counselor Campbell has also joined us. So I believe those are all of my colleagues. And I'm going to move on next to just let everyone know who our expected speakers are for today. We are Yusufi Valley of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, Ed Gaston of the Boston Grow Hall's main streets, Carlos Espinosa of JPNDC, Suzanne Lee of the Chinese Progressive Association, and Vanessa Calderon Rosado of Inquilinos Boricua en Acción IVA will be joining us. Okay, make sure that I do not miss anyone. And just for the record, this is my first hearing that I'm chairing and that I also happen to co-sponsor. So I'm very humbled to be here among folks who I know deeply care about this issue, and grateful to everyone who's participating. I want to start off by, I want to thank all the panelists and the advocates who have shown up today to take part of this important conversation. This issue is deeply personal to me. I remember growing up in Boston, being the only person in my neighborhood who could speak English, spending time with family, friends, and neighbors at various government agencies and having to translate for them. I saw then a lot of the same problems that we're seeing today. The city is working as fast as possible to get information out, but time and time again, we have seen that this information is released in English first and then other languages later. We have had a lot of constituents call our office asking for help understanding resources and information, either because it wasn't translated or because the language wasn't culturally competent. Even if I had a hard time understanding, even I had a hard time understanding some of the language. But we're not just here to talk about the problems. My hope is that that this is going to be a solution-oriented conversation. We already know what we know, so let's work collaboratively and cooperatively to find ways that address language access and information parities in ways that will go beyond the COVID-19 crisis. I want to thank my co-sponsor, Councillor Flynn, for his work on this issue throughout the years. I'm excited for the work that lies ahead. Y una cuanta cosa que voy a decir en español, que para mí esta cosa es bien importante personalmente, porque yo sé lo difícil que es no entender el lenguaje y ayudar a los demás. So, estoy bien orgullosa de estar aquí hoy con todos ustedes. So I would like to recognize the Docket, other sponsors for opening statements before turning this over to public testimony. Councillor Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I want to say thank you to you for your incredible work on language access issues, not just on the city council, but in your prior experience as well. I want to say thank you to the panelists also for your commitment to civil rights, language access, and for all the incredible work you've done in our neighborhoods. And finally, to the administration, Mayor Walsh's administration, I also want to say thank you to you for your excellent work on language access and being a strong advocate in support of our immigrant community as well. I see my friend Yusuf up there, and I have an opportunity to work with him the last several years, and he's a real credit to this city and does a tremendous job working on language access issues. Just as a way of background, I represent a very diverse district: South Boston, Chinatown, the South End, downtown Boston, and have a large Cantonese speaking community, Mandarin speaking community, and Spanish speaking community. When I got sworn in as a district city council, I had the opportunity to hire people, and I specifically looked for people that could speak various languages so that I could do my job effectively in representing my constituents. I'm proud to have 4 women of color that work for me, 4 out of 5 employees, and the 4 women of color all speak various languages, including Cantonese, Mandarin, and Spanish. I've been focused on the city council on this issue, working with the city to translate material. I've also held community forums in various languages since this pandemic happened in January, including 10 in Chinatown and many in the South End, working with Chief Martinez at the Public Health Commission. It was critical to communicate in Cantonese. It was critical to communicate in Mandarin and in Spanish, working closely with IBA, working closely with the Chinese Progressive.
Oh, Councillor Flynn, we lost you there for a second. We can't hear you.
A number. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. I've heard from Chinatown residents, business owners who find it hard at times to navigate applications. I know that the city is putting a tremendous amount of resources and assistance in this program. I look forward to a robust discussion about how we can strengthen our language access capabilities in our city in working with my colleagues in the mayor on this important issue. I think there's no more important issue in the city than language access and ensuring our immigrant neighbors have a voice in city government. I'm proud to work with my colleagues in Mayor Walsh's team on this important initiative. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your leadership.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I'm going to now recognize my colleagues. I'm going in the order that you have arrived. I'm going to ask Councillor Breeden from District 9. You now have the floor if you have any opening remarks.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. Thank you, Councillor Flynn, for your leadership in this very important area. In District 9, we have a diverse community. The two major language groups that we have out here are our Chinese community that speak Cantonese and Mandarin. We also have a large Russian community, and we have a significant number of Spanish speakers and Portuguese speakers in our district as well. So I think this issue of language access is critically important, no more important than in this moment when it's really vital that we get information to our communities that's accurate, accessible, and timely. And I look forward to learning so much more this afternoon and listening to the advocates. And thanks again for your leadership in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Breeden. Now I'd like to recognize President Council Kim Janey from District 7. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Mejia. It is such a pleasure to be here and to see so many friends. So I first want to start by thanking you as the chair and as the lead sponsor, and also to Councillor Flynn, not just for your leadership in calling for this hearing, but for your constant, consistent, persistent advocacy in this space around language access. And we know it's not just about language access, but it's also about cultural proficiency. We can't just be translating things. And so this is such an important conversation. I say that as someone who represents a very diverse district with many languages spoken, prominent languages, Spanish, obviously, Somali, Cape Verdean Creole, all spoken in my district, and a number of other languages. There are, I have Russian spoken in my district. There are Asian languages spoken in my district. So I know how important this is. And as someone who is also a language learner myself, teaching myself another language and really seeing firsthand some of the challenges when you are limited as a mono English speaker, and I think that is the real deficit here. And I think too often in our city and in our educational spaces, we have kind of framed speaking other languages as that other. We kind of othered the other language rather than seeing what a beautiful asset it is to come with a language and then to be able to learn English and then to be able to be bilingual and bicultural. And then that's where the real power is. And so I'm grateful to see the shift and to see that there are strong advocates on this body joining with the many folks who I'm seeing all the beautiful faces here in this Zoom, people like Elsa, who I haven't seen in a long time. I see Suzanne here. I think Vanessa's in here somewhere. I don't know. I see Lisette. And then obviously the strong work that is happening in the administration and in the partnership there. So this is an important conversation. I'm grateful that we're structuring this hearing in a way where we have a language access and that the hearing itself is being interpreted. And this is the first time ever where we are doing our best to make sure that this will be accessible in the future. And so the hope and the goal is that we are recording each of the audio files so that we can match up these audio files after the fact with the visual, and the first time ever have a full city council hearing in another language, in Spanish, in Haitian Creole, and Mandarin, and Cantonese. So this is really powerful work that we're doing. I'm really proud of the leadership, again, of the makers and all of the work that the amazing partners have been doing in the administration, and obviously my colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just for those who may not know, Councillor Janey is Dominicana. But thank you so much for your remarks. I'm gonna move on now to another well-versed, multilingual counselor who does her due diligence to making sure that she is able to connect with her constituents. I'm going to ask Councillor Lydia Edwards, who represents District 1, to open up with some remarks.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Mejia. And I want to say thank you to also your co-maker, Counselor Flynn. Both of you have been steadfast in assuring that you campaign on inclusion, and you are demonstrating it today. So I want to say thank you for making history. I want to say thank you also to Counselor Janey for when history came knocking, you without a doubt said, we're here and we're going to meet you where you are. And I just think that that's worth us, reflecting on in that moment. We are becoming more democratic. We discussed this earlier actually about how as a city, we need to be more accessible, and being more accessible makes us more democratic. It makes our democracy stronger, that everyone feels that they literally have a voice. I have been blessed to have learned many languages, and my first foreign language that I learned was German. I was a German foreign exchange student. At the age of 16 years old, I left everything and everyone I knew and moved in with a host family and tried to go to high school. And I think that has been the best example and best lived experience for me to understand what it feels like to be completely muted. A woman normally having a voice and being present and being able to excel in school, all of that was shut down. How to make friends, how to explain when you're sad, how to explain when you're happy, all of that was shut down, and is temporarily shut down when you cannot speak the language of the people around you. And 4 months later, I managed to figure out German, and I still have it to a certain extent, and I've gone on to learn Portuguese and Spanish. But the fact of the matter remains, I will never forget what it felt to be shut down and quieted. And when people and knowing what it feels like to have someone being impatient with you when you're just trying to buy something at the store, or when you're saying there's an emergency, or that you have that you're experiencing pain, and that people dismiss everything about you because you're either saying it in an accent, or you're not saying it in perfect diction, or you just don't speak the language very well. So this is near and dear to my heart. Many of my district, most of East Boston is from immigrant roots. It was second only to Ellis Island in terms of immigrants coming into this country. We made Americans in East Boston, and I am so proud to represent that immigrant history. So this hearing, again, thank you for making history, Counselor Mejia. Thank you for making history, Counselor Flynn, and thank you for your leadership, Counselor Janey. I look forward to a robust hearing and conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Edwards. This is really exciting. I mean, this is why we do what we do. And when we talk about all means all, this is what it looks like when we create space for all to really be engaged. So really, again, thankful to Central staff for their hard work in helping us make this happen. I'd like to now recognize at-large Counselor Flaherty.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. It's great to be here, obviously, to back-to-backs, your very first hearing as a member of the council, chairing your own committee hearing, and now to be here while you're chairing one of the first matters sponsored. So exciting day for you, and you're doing a great job. And obviously to join the co-sponsors and having a discussion on a very important hearing. And as I mentioned from our earlier budget hearing, the Boston City Council has always taken the lead on a number of issues, and transliteration of ballots. We were probably one of the first, and now obviously making sure we're following through for all of our residents in this hearing here. Diversity is a strength of our city. I say it often, and that strength is led by our immigrant communities and those that speak another language other than English. So happy to join you guys for a spirited discussion, and appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councilor Flynn as well as a co-sponsor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
And Councilor Wu.
Yes, I'd like to recognize at-large Counselor Wu. Counselor Wu, you now have the floor.
Gracias, Councilor Mejia, Councilor Flynn. 谢谢大家，很高兴看到大家. It's such an important issue and so fundamental for a huge number of our Boston residents. And what I love most about the leadership of this set of counselors, and especially the chairwoman in highlighting this issue, is that we on the council are constantly talking about how it's not just the actual words, right? And making sure that at some point there are words printed on papers in different languages, but the whole process, the timeline, the engagement with communities, the partnership with trusted partners in each community to make sure that we are, that people are at the table and not just sort of passively receiving information at some point. So thank you for your focus on this. I'm really eager to be part of this conversation and to help support whatever comes out of it. Thank you, and very grateful to the leadership of advocates, some of whom are on this call, who have made sure that Boston has led on this issue for a long time, and certainly we are seeing how much more there is to go, but very grateful that we've always had folks championing access and inclusion on in the community too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wu. I'd like to now recognize District 4 Councillor Campbell. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia, and thank you, Councillor Flynn, for your leadership and for putting action right with respect to this issue, not only for the hearing you're hosting, but of course, since you've joined the council, Councillor Mejia, always raising up these issues in our conversations, whether on the council floor or in our conversations with the administration in response to COVID-19. So really appreciate your intentionality here. And Councillor Flynn, much respect to you too as well, hosting your community meetings, always making sure that you have folks to translate in the various languages in your district. So appreciate your leadership. And of course, President Janey as well, and pushing for resources for this too from the administration. Of course, I represent a large district, largely Dorchester and Mattapan, and I have a large part of Dorchester. It's my biggest neighborhood, a large piece of Mattapan, a little bit of Jamaica Plain and Rosendale. And we have an extremely diverse district, a very large Latinx population representing numerous countries, folks from various countries from in Africa, a large Haitian community, Cape Verdean community, Vietnamese community. The list goes on. And if we truly are serious about putting forth policies to address the inequities we're talking about quite a bit right now, or all the other issues that plague the city, and we want to co-create solutions with our residents, access, of course, is essential, not just in terms of language and culture, and us being culturally competent, but also looking at ways in which we pull solutions from these communities. They're living the problems every single day, and they have the solutions as well. And I think in the midst of a time in which we are talking about immigration and immigrants in a certain way, particularly those who are undocumented, this is a very, and continues to be a very timely conversation. I also would like to add the layer of what it means, not only in terms of which countries we come from, but our religion plays a role here, and that we are often very intentional of connecting with different faith-based organizations as well. So all the things that people would seek to separate or divide us, this is an opportunity to say, none of that, we're all in this together. And so I really am excited about this conversation, excited to hear from the panelists, of course, the city employees that do this work every day, and our advocates. All of you work really hard. I do hope everyone is safe and healthy in the midst of COVID-19. Consider me a partner in the work. And I'm all about co-creating with community and changing the narrative. And I think you say this too, Councilor Mejia, changing the narrative from a deficit lens to one of encouragement, resiliency, you name it, the list is long as to the strength of these communities. So looking forward to thinking of ways to pull them in a more substantive way, in a less superficial way. So thank you all, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'd like to now recognize and ask Councillor Asabi George at large if you would like to make opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's quite the cast of characters, I might add, from different aspects of our city, not just the linguistic diversity that's here at the table, but your experience and what you all do for all of our residents across the city. As a daughter of immigrants, both who came to this country speaking different languages, my mother Polish, my father Arabic, I certainly appreciate the need for greater language and cultural access. When we don't have the ability to communicate, we lose our access both to any sort of movement and certainly to any sort of power or authority. So language access is critically important. It's certainly a lived experience for my family, and one that I look forward to discussing in greater detail today. I also just want to note, I appreciate Councillor Campbell bringing up the idea of religion. and faith-based work, because we often are excluding too many of our residents based on their faith, and recognizing that certainly as a source of power, not of deficit, is critical, but recognizing it and naming it is also important. Thank you, Chair Mejia, for bringing this before us, and certainly Councillor Flynn for your unwavering leadership in this space. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. I'd like to now ask Councillor Bach. You now have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to commend you and all the makers for holding this hearing today. I think, you know, language access, it's not something nice to have. It's something completely essential, and essential to, I think, living into our identity, like the city that we are, not just the city we aspire to be. I've been thinking a lot about the fact that I think we've got about 40% of our students at BPS who are ESL. And if you think about that, just take 40% of BPS, that's the 4th largest school district in the state, right? Are we running a 4th largest in the state, right, bilingual school district? No, not yet, right? And I think, are we running a city that lives into the like multilingual diversity that we have? No. And I think, you know, as the legislative branch of that city, we really have to be serious about both modeling, like with today, what it would look like to be serious about that, and pushing the envelope. Because I, like Councillor Edwards, have had the experience of learning other languages, and the challenge of that as a teenager, learning Spanish and learning Chinese in college, and finding myself in other countries, and really learning firsthand how unlocking access to another language, it's not just about literal translation, it's about the whole forms of imagination and knowledge that come as part of those languages. And I think we just really have to be creative about how to unlock that imagination for our democratic life together. So I was really proud when I worked at the Housing Authority, at the Boston Housing Authority, to find there a sort of program that's really grown in the last 10 years around much more robust language access. Still, I would say much more robust than any of our city departments. But that's a commitment of resources, right, that came over a decade in response to a lawsuit. So I just think, again, thinking about how do we get ahead of this curve of reacting to sort of what we're being held responsible for legally by the law, and embrace this as just as a norm and something that's important to all of us. And certainly in my district, we're blessed with many multilingual buildings that have really shown us how you do that, how you build multilingual community. I'm thinking about Mission Park and Moreville House and Kenmore Abbey and Blackstone Apartments, and just places where people do this work every day of living together and figuring out how to communicate and putting the resources into communicating. So I wanted to just also quick shout out to, we've had volunteers in my district calling seniors in Spanish and Russian and Mandarin and Cantonese, and I'm really grateful to all of them. And to my aide, Henry Santana, who's been making a bunch of calls in Spanish. And so I just really, I'm really grateful for this hearing. You know, a mí me importa mucho que toda la gente puedan participar en nuestra vida común. So I look forward to this hearing, and am grateful for leadership. 谢谢你们.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenzie Block, showing off over there all your multi-languages. Good job. So I know, Councillor Flaherty, you have your hand up. I'm just curious if you, was that on purpose, or do you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies. I'd be remiss. I just wanted to recognize, I saw her participating is Vanessa Calderon-Rosa, and want to recognize her for all of her great work. When I first got elected, she was one of the first folks that I met with. Her work at EBA, her work around education, housing, language access. So great panelist. And I just wanted to give her a shout out and single her out for her decades-wide commitment to our city.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna let you do that. You already done it. Thank you. Yes, she's gonna be one of our panelists, so we'll have an opportunity to hear from her. I think that folks who know me know that I'm very informal, and I'm playing a very formal role right now. This is a very important issue, and as much as playful as I like to be, this is something that's near and dear to me, and I am really grateful to everyone who is taking their afternoon to to join us. In the interest of really leading with those who are living the realities and doing this work, and just the type of leader that I am around stepping to the side and letting others lead, I wanted to open up this hearing and allowing hearing from our public testimony first, before we go into our panelists. So I'm going to ask, we have Puya Chandarshikar. If you could unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you for public testimony. We have set aside 2 minutes for each of our public testimonies.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Pooja Chandrasekhar, and I'm a first-year medical student at Harvard Medical School. I'm also the founder and director of the COVID-19 Health Literacy Project. I'm here today in strong support of the order for a hearing on language access and information parity during the COVID-19 outbreak. As the COVID-19 pandemic began to pick up steam, I spoke with the leadership of a mobile health clinic that serves predominantly minority, immigrant, and refugee patients in the greater Boston area. Many of these patients have limited English proficiency. The lack of multilingual COVID-19 information meant staff were unable to provide these non-English speaking patients with information in their native language that could protect them and their families. This experience motivated me to start the COVID-19 Health Literacy Project to create and translate accessible, reliable COVID-19 information into over 40 languages to help all patients, especially immigrants and non-English speaking communities, stay informed and healthy. Our materials are produced in collaboration with Harvard Health Publishing and are being used by hospitals, community-based organizations, youth groups, and homeless shelters here in Boston and also around the country. The overwhelmingly positive response we received speaks to the critical need for these materials. As a city, it is our responsibility to make sure no one is left on the sidelines of this global pandemic. We cannot continue shortchanging non-English speakers. We know from past epidemics like the swine flu that the lack of multilingual health information actually puts these groups, which are already vulnerable, at a higher risk of infection. This is why I'm here today to ask that you join me in supporting this order. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this critical issue, and I'm happy to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much. We're really excited and grateful to have you here. I am now going to recognize, and I'm going to ask our panelists. I speak like 100 miles a minute. I'm going to ask, I'm going to be mindful of this myself, but I'm going to ask our panelists to, as we speak, to just keep in mind that we're translating in real time. And so if we could just be mindful of that and speak a little bit slower, that would be great. I'm going to now ask Elsa Flores, if we can unmute Elsa as our panelist. And también Elsa puede hablar si lo quiere decir en español y se traduce en inglés, o si quiere hablar en inglés y se traduce en español, lo que tú te sientas lo más cómodo.
Hablar en español.
Okay. Elsa, you have the floor. Tiene el piso ahora, mi amor. Dale.
Hola, mi nombre es Elsa Flores. Quiero agradecer a todo el equipo de nuestra ciudad de Boston por traer esto a la mesa, especialmente a nuestra concejal Julia Mejía por esta iniciativa y el apoyo que tiene siempre para todas las comunidades diversas de Boston. Yo pienso que mi idioma es español. Y para nosotros, nuestra comunidad latina, es muy importante tener el acceso a la interpretación, ya que tenemos un enlace, por ejemplo, entre la alcaldía de Boston y nuestra comunidad de East Boston. Yo viví en Boston por casi 20 años y recibimos mensajes muy buenos, excelentes. La comunicación, pero todos los mensajes son en inglés, no vienen en español. Entonces, para nosotros es muy importante recibir toda información en nuestro propio idioma, porque así podemos entender, podemos contribuir a nuestra comunidad. Por ejemplo, en este caso de esta pandemia, llega la información, pero no sabemos lineamientos, no sabemos protocolos en nuestro propio idioma para poder prevenir y que esto no esté incrementando. Entonces es importante que recibamos toda la información de parte de la ciudad de Boston, que sea en nuestro propio idioma, el español, para tener esa información más exacta y poder entender qué es el mensaje que nos están haciendo llegar. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Elsa, gracias. Bien agradecida por tu voz y por todo lo que tú haces en nuestra comunidad. Somos bien dichosos de tenerte. So I am going to, I'm going to move on now to Lisette Lee. If we can unmute you, that would be great. You now have the floor. Another champion.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilwoman Mejia and Chairman Flynn and members of the City Council for the opportunity for me to submit testimony. My name is Lisette Lee. I'm the Executive Director at the Vietnamese American Initiative for Development. Our organization serves residents of Bill's Corner in Greater Boston with a focus on Vietnamese immigrants and refugees ages 3 to 103. According to a University of Massachusetts Boston Institute for Asian American Studies report, over 74% of Vietnamese in Boston are foreign-born, and 76 say that they speak English less than well. The median income, according at the 2010 census, was $33,000 for a household, and the family poverty rate was about 30%. Many in our communities came as refugees and may not be literate in the Vietnamese language and or have low levels of education. So I encourage that we think about language access beyond translation, but how culture and history play a role in how folks are engaging or not engaging. So, you know, before the pandemic, we saw that there's a disconnect between families' needs and their ability to navigate because of language barriers and understanding systems, or just general distrust of government. The past 3 months have not shown us anything that we didn't know, but perhaps has put an exclamation mark on the fact that our communities are not uniformed, and therefore resources and capacity need to meet the needs of individuals and individual communities. Our staff for the past 3 months have been lifelines for folks who are isolated beyond just being physically isolated. 2 examples are during our regular wellness calls to older adults. They continuously ask us when we reopen the program, not just because they miss their friends, but because our staff were translators. They were bridges to American society, and that is something that has been very hard and traumatic, I think, for many of our older adults. We also continue to have a backlog with helping folks fill out unemployment and PUA because of language barrier. So I hope that as the city and the city council builds the collective ability to connect with all residents, that it includes translation in multiple languages, yes, working with groups like ours and ethnic press to figure out outreach plans prior to implementation, increasing the number of bilingual and bicultural staff within City Hall, and also that as you're going through the budgeting process, that you consider and push for each department and funds for each department to reflect equity and language access as major considerations. And lastly, I hope that the council will join many of us in advocating that everyone who will vote in this fall's election will have the ability to safely and independently through fully bilingual vote by mail ballots. This will help our community, particularly older adults, to not feel like they are put in vulnerable positions in order to exercise their civil rights. Thank you so much for allowing me to submit testimony.
Thank you, Lisette Lee, for amplifying your voice. I'm going to now ask that our next public testimony is Melania?
Melanie.
Melanie, well, I'm already speaking Spanish for you. Melanie Roach, you now have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Flynn for sponsoring this hearing. My name is Melanie Roach Lapuca, and I'm a resident of East Boston. I'm here because my neighborhood has been advocating against a project at 437 Frankfurt Street in East Boston since last year. The developers are proposing building a 4-floor building in a community of 2- and 3-floor homes, the majority of which have yards. The project is simply too large in scope and scale for our community, and we've been advocating for a smaller building and less bedrooms to minimize the impact it will have on our community. Throughout the process, there's been a lack of information available in other languages. In our community and in our neighborhood, we have multiple families that speak Spanish, which I've been able to translate for. We also have a family that speaks Portuguese that I'm able to communicate with in Spanish and in English with some family members. We have a Vietnamese family that we communicate with through their children. However, there have been no materials or attempts to interpret for our families from the city throughout the entire process, including from our neighborhood association meetings up until now. As a result, many do not feel comfortable attending any meetings. I was planning on interpreting at the ZBA meeting for our neighbors in Spanish on May 19th, as no interpretation had been offered. However, that still leaves many of our other neighbors out, as I only speak Spanish. Prior to COVID-19, the ZBA hearing on 437 Frankfurt Street had been deferred to next week to May 19th due to a petition that a neighborhood had written and signed. We found out last week from a community organization that the ZBA was planning on holding the hearing on May 19th virtually, which was shocking. We received no notice about this from anyone in the mail or via email. And when we found out, we looked at the zoning board website, which is only available in English. There was no information available on the website, and we had to send multiple emails to get a response, and of course, to be able to communicate with our neighbors. At this point, they responded that they were hoping to meet virtually on May 19th and would send us information soon. After sending multiple emails expressing our concerns over equity and meeting virtually, the meeting is now postponed. However, we're still concerned that this meeting will occur virtually, as we still have the same issues of equity as I've experienced in remote learning since the start of school closures as a school leader. As you may know, not everyone has access to the technology to email their statement, let alone to connect to a virtual meeting. In addition to our neighbors that may not be proficient in English, of course, we can support them in translating if need be. Although there may be internet available, and many have experienced connectivity issues with free internet with a large amount of people trying to use the internet. Additionally, there are a number of neighbors that are not technologically proficient. I was planning on providing interpretation to several of our neighbors at the ZBA meeting to Spanish, but because it's not in person, I won't be able to do this, further creating inequity in access to language and blocking several of our neighbors from participating. So thank you so much for providing interpretation at the meeting here today.
Yeah.
Each of these issues will prevent multiple neighbors from participating in a virtual ZBA meeting. Like I said, my community has been highly involved in this process since the start. This is not right, and it's not equitable. Because of the pandemic, we can't go into our neighbors' houses to assist them with technology, to walk them through how to log on if they do have the technology, or to interpret the meeting. Within our neighborhood, we have multiple essential workers working in grocery stores, restaurants, and healthcare settings, including COVID ICUs. We also have multiple community members with underlying medical conditions, making it unsafe for us to come together to support each other to navigate technology or to interpret virtual meetings. We as a community urge you to consider matters of equity when considering how and when to hold this meeting, as well as future ZBA meetings. Navigating the process has been challenging for myself as someone that is proficient in English, and I can't even imagine trying to do it if I were not proficient in English. No one should be prevented from attending this meeting for either health reasons or equity reasons. The original rescheduling notice that we received said that we are urged to write letters rather than attend in person, but we have been told multiple times by multiple stakeholders that our letters and signatures don't matter as much as who shows up to the meeting. But how can we ensure that our community can show up when we cannot ensure equity of access to the meeting? So we as a community are really urging the City Council to support us in rescheduling future ZBA meetings for a later date when we can all safely attend in person. Thank you so much for allowing me to provide testimony here today.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask Councillor Flynn if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, the testimony
Councillor
was,
Flynn?
yeah. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. The testimony was was helpful, but I think we can't get into very specific issues or individual cases. We're trying to make this as broad as we can. And so, you know, these specific cases are probably not the avenue for us to discuss them. We're trying to talk more about language access throughout the city and how it impacts different groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn, for bringing that to our attention. There were some language access issues as it relates to this particular situation that Melanie was referring to, and what we have seen, that barriers to engagement, if people don't understand the language, they're not going to show up to meetings. So civic engagement is really key. And so appreciate the comments. I'd like to now go to the next speaker. We have Marigot TV, and please correct me because I always correct everybody when they don't pronounce my name right. I ask you to do so with me as well.
Thank you. That's okay. It's pronounced Marigoltiv, but your effort was valiant. Thank you. So I'd like to say hello to all of you and thank you for the opportunity to express my thoughts on the hearing today. My name is Marigoltiv, and I am a doctoral candidate in experimental psychology at McGill University, which is in Canada. My thesis, research, and expertise are in social and cognitive aspects of bilingualism, and I have recently advocated for health parity among linguistic minorities in Pennsylvania, where I currently am. This is how I came to know the work that Councilperson Mejia and their team, including Jacob de Blakecourt, are doing on this front in Boston, and why I'm writing and speaking today. I would like to speak in strong support of this hearing to promote language access and parity for minority language and non-English speakers. In particular, I would like to share two findings from a paper published by some of my colleagues about bilingualism in clinical settings. First, even a highly proficient second language English speaker may lack the specific vocabulary and jargon that is used to discuss health and healthcare practices. And so having translated materials in various languages would facilitate more general comprehension of the facts. Second, the way bilinguals experience and process emotional information in their first and second languages has been found to differ. Emotional responses to emotionally weighted language are stronger and greater in the first language and dampened in the second, especially for people who acquired their second language later in life. For this reason, if information about the pandemic is solely or mainly communicated in English, a second language English speaker may have trouble emotionally connecting and weighing that information to the extent that they should be. So providing information to residents in their mother tongue would put everyone on the same footing. So for these reasons and many, many others, I urge you to also support this initiative, which sounds like many of you are. And I think this initiative aims to ensure the same quality and comprehension of coronavirus information to all Bostonians, regardless of their language background. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify on this important issue today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited about the panel that we have lined up here for today. I have some of my mentors, people who I look up to, people who I've worked with in the struggle. And so I'm really excited to have you all here with us today. I want to introduce Yusufi Bali from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. And when I talk about showing up and really listening to the concerns, he's been such a great thought partner during the COVID-19 crisis. and has always been a good partner in our office in all things that deal with our most vulnerable population. So I'd like to ask you, Yusufi, to start off with some opening remarks. What I do know is that we're keeping people on time here. We have a lot of folks, so I'm gonna have a little buzzer. You have 5 minutes, and I'm gonna start timing you. And if you go over it, I'm gonna put you on mute. Okay.
No worries. Thank you so much, Counselor. Just don't count the fact that I'm going to congratulate you for your first chairing you're chairing your first council hearing as part of my time. That's the only thing I ask. But congratulations on that, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for Councilor Flynn's leadership, and really for the whole council for its focus on equity. It is much appreciated, and I'm really appreciated the partnership that you and I have had, particular, as well as Councillor Flynn, around a number of equity issues during the COVID crisis. I do want to also say this is my first council hearing as well, so I think we're making some history together here, Councillor. So I think, speaking of equity, just wanted to start off by saying that for Mayor Walsh and the city overall, ensuring that all of our residents, regardless of background, language abilities, disabilities, whatever it is, that it's a core value that they have access to all of the city's programs and services. And it's a core value that we are continually striving for and working towards on a daily basis. I just want to share a little bit about what has happened in language access since Mayor Walsh took office. Talk to you a little bit about what we've done during the COVID crisis, and then we'll turn it over to the rest of our panelists after that, as you deem fit, Madam Chair. So, since Mayor Walsh took office, I think the critical pieces that we've established is, first of all, developed and passed the Language and Communications Ordinance in partnership with Councillor Wu. We launched the Language and Communications Access Program, which now is housed under the Civic Engagement Cabinet, and I have with me present from the city Chief of Staff of the Civic Engagement Cabinet, Eddie McGuire, with us. That establishment of that program led to the hiring of full-time LCA coordinator, who then became the director. And now we have a full team that's working on this piece and just doing a tremendous job working around the clock. We provide 311 on-demand interpretation capability that didn't exist before Mayor Walsh took office. And I think most critically here, the City of Boston's Language and Communication Access is a model and a leader for local governments throughout the United States. We're frequently sharing best practices on coalition calls and in-person conferences over the past few years. During COVID, we have, and Mayor Walsh has been very clear that LCA must be prioritized. Just to give you a few examples of that, we expanded our texting service from and changed vendors in the middle of this crisis, such that we have text alerts now in 11 different languages. We on the city's website, we have all of our COVID information in 10 different languages. 311 and Mayor's Healthline have multilingual agents and use an on-demand interpretation service. We've also tried creative ideas coming from community partners, like sound trucks with COVID-19 messages in multiple languages. And that, by the way, came from the Health Inequities Task Force. And I could go on and on to the multiple things. We also recognize as an administration that it's not just about language and communication access. To Councillor Janey's point and other councillors here, it's about a holistic approach to communicate with our various communities. So our ONS liaisons have been working around the clock to make sure that they're on the Somali hotlines, the Chinese WeChat groups, on the various, the Brazilian WhatsApp groups. And we as MOIA are holding weekly webinars for our CBOs every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. We're also holding an ethnic media roundtable every 2 weeks, in addition, to make sure that our folks are getting getting the accurate information and access to services and programs during this time. One piece I just want to mention is that, you know, we are, just to be very transparent, we are continually trying to balance speed with quality. We know we need to get the information out as quickly as possible. At the same time, we can't compromise quality, because if we do that, then the wrong information ends up in people's hands. So I do want to share that particular piece. We also know that we can always do more to reach our value of ensuring that everyone has access to information. We know we're a leader in the nation around this, but we know we have to do more, and we will continue throughout this crisis and beyond to be creative, flexible, and innovative to making that happen. And we're committed to learning and improving throughout this process. With that, I'll close out my remarks. And Madam Chair, if you'd like other panelists from the city to speak at this point, happy to do that, or whatever you deem fit.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. You under good job, 5 minutes. I would like to congratulate you for staying on time. In the interest of making this an equitable process, I'd like to be able to hear from someone outside of the administration and then go back, given the time frame that we have, and ask someone else to speak. I would like to, just out of curiosity, I know that the way we structure our hearings is that someone speaks and then we allow everyone on the council to ask questions. I want to be super mindful that we have a full, we have close to 35 people here, and I'm not one to hold people hostage in the interest of holding people hostage. So I'm going to ask just very few questions, and then I'm going to ask Councilor Flynn to ask questions, and allow my council colleagues to do the same and to keep their questions brief. So I just really quick, Yusufi, on the website for the Office of Immigrant Advancement, multilingual resources are close to the bottom of an all English page, and all the language lists are printed in English. How can we make these resources more prominent and really accessible to people who don't speak English? Just curious about the layout, if there's any way to kind of like make the website a little bit more language friendly.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I know we internally also have discussed. An, do you want to, An, who's a senior policy advisor in my office.
Yep.
An, can you just chime in on that? Because I know there's some
Yes,
bigger limitations around that.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, are you referring to the Immigrant Advancement website?
Yeah, on the cities, on the website for the Office of Immigrant Advancement.
Mm-hmm. So what we did is we have a link at the very top right now for COVID-19. And if you click on that, then that will take you to the multilingual downloads. On the right-hand side, I see what you're talking about with the information at the bottom for our resource guides, but that's a specific tool. But what we can do is we can put information on the right sidebar. Unfortunately, for mobile, the design doesn't allow us to do that. So a best practice that the Rental Relief Fund has done is to have just links at the very top in those languages within the text. But we unfortunately haven't had the chance to update our website to meet that best practice yet.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm curious about, since the outbreak of COVID-19, what kinds of calls have you been receiving? How many of them have been in languages other than English? And does Moila track what languages constituents are speaking when they call in?
So you know what, we'll have to go back because we have been tracking the calls and get you that data, Counselor, because I don't want to misspeak on that. But what I will tell you is the vast majority of calls we've gotten are around assistance, food assistance, cash assistance, those kind of pieces. As you know, we have a pretty robust food infrastructure, so we've been connecting folks to that, as well as through the Boston Resiliency Fund, we've funded a number of immigrant nonprofits. And when I say number, easily in the 30s of immigrant nonprofits. And so we're able to direct folks towards those nonprofits. I will also say we've gotten so many calls outside of Boston, and that's been something that's been a major challenge as well. But I can get you the stats from different languages. We do on our staff have Cantonese speaker, Haitian Creole speaker, Spanish speaker, Vietnamese speaker. As you know, I can speak a little bit of Arabic and also Urdu. And am I missing any languages?
We have a conversational Cabo Verdean Creole and conversational Brazilian Portuguese, and we'll hire a full-time Mandarin or full-time staff member who speaks Mandarin and Spanish, who's starting in 2 weeks.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And one last thing, just because I want to be super mindful of time and I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to speak, is that one of the things that I've been talking about is the cultural competency piece. And one thing is to translate things into different languages. And the other thing is to do it in a way that is culturally responsive. I know that there are a lot of things that we take for granted when we're trying to communicate with folks, but if we're not doing it with the extra layer of cultural competency, then we're missing the mark in being able to communicate with folks, with a clear example of social distancing as an example of what that means. As an English speaker, as an English language learner, for me, I even struggle with that whole flattening the curve, and all that language it's so technical. I just think that things get lost in translation. And so I think language access for me goes just beyond just the translation piece. But then people who are native speakers that are really understanding the culture is really important. So I see that my time is up for speaking, and I want to be really mindful of the journey. I know that we have one of our panelists that just inboxed me and said that they have to leave at 4:30. So Yusufi, if you don't mind, my colleagues, I'm going to hold their questions so that I can have this panelist speak, and then we'll come back to you for questions, okay?
Sure.
I'm going to go next to Carlos Perez from GP and DC.
Hello. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. My name is Carlos Espinosa Toro, and I am the Director of Small Business Services at JPNDC. What I wanted to say is that I've been helping business owners access the different funding that has been coming through the federal, state, and city funding sources. And one of the things that has been difficult for the business owners that I work with is that if there's a language barrier, understanding the nuances and the details behind these loans, they will be afraid of applying for them. And so in those cases, some of them have missed that opportunity. So it will be great if this effort could actually turn into a way for them to be able to read these nuances and details in their own language. The second thing I wanted to mention is that I also work with them, supporting them, helping understand these specific topics. And therefore I invest roughly about 4 hours per individual in about 2 weeks. If they were able to have these documents in their own language, I may be able to spend less time and serve more people. So again, this effort from Councilor Mejia is very important. Number one, because it would allow folks not to be afraid of applying for this funding, which is very important for them. And number two, because it will allow for folks that are helping these folks to actually be having more capacity to help more individuals. And thank you again for the opportunity to present the testimony.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask my colleagues if you could show by raising your blue hand if you have any questions specifically for Carlos before he leaves, because I know he is not going to be able to stay with us beyond 4:30. If you have any questions specifically for Carlos, you could show your blue hands, and if not, I will move on to questions. I'm going to go back to questions for Yusufi from my colleagues, and I'm going to start off with Councillor Flynn from District 2. You now, oh wait, I see Councillor Sabi George, you raised your blue hand. Do you have a question for Carlos from
I
JP?
did. I raised my blue hand. We're obviously talking about language access and how important that is to access the decision makers, access the work. I think Carlos brings up a really interesting point in making sure that when we're talking about language access and we have someone to support an individual who English isn't their native language through the business portion, that we're making sure that we have individuals who are skilled in sort of that technical language that sometimes comes along with business. And I imagine that that's also a need within that community. As for example, just sort of maybe to simplify it, but a medical interpreter has a certain skill set. Someone who's supporting an individual who owns a small business and has, whether it's revenue information, business information, sort of that technical assistance, that there is a certain cultural competency through the business lens that's necessary, added to it, a real disconnect with language access, and that's what we're talking about. So I don't know if Carlos can talk a little bit to that point, and perhaps highlight the special need within the business community for certain language skills.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sabi George. Just wanted to quickly mention that we currently work with accountants as well as with lawyers. The need for accountant and lawyers that speak the language and are able to convey that message to the business owners is critical. The reason why I don't work with so many accountants is because I need to work with bilingual ones. And it's very difficult for these accountants also to access everybody because they were overwhelmed. In addition to that, there is also sometimes not enough funding to be able to pay for their services. So I think it is critical that this effort also think about a way to be able to provide these experts to be able to convey their knowledge in the language of the clients and in a manner that they can also do it and they can receive some funding for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it for me.
Thank you. I was muted. Someone is trying to prevent me from talking. Carrie, let go of that mute. All right, so I'm going to, now we're gonna go back to Yusufi, and I'm gonna have my council colleagues, we're gonna go to Councillor Flynn for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Just wanted to follow up with Yusuf on his comments. I know you're doing excellent work and trying to reach as many residents as you can in various languages. What is the biggest challenge your office in language access is facing, and how could we address some of those challenges?
Thanks so much, Councillor, for that, Councillor Flynn, for that question. So just that I'm clear on this, the Language and Communication Access Department is actually within the Civic Engagement Cabinet, and a big reason for that is because really the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement is really an advocacy department. The reason we're in the administration is to make sure that the rest of the city's services, et cetera, are really serving all of our immigrants. So just wanted to clarify that, because I know sometimes there can be a confusion, and I know you know this, Councillors, just for the rest of the folks out there. I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of our systems do rely on volunteers, right? And this crisis, I mean, we've relied so much on our volunteers to be able to, I'm talking about city staff volunteers, right, to do so much. And in some ways you're doing the same thing today for the city council hearing, right, in terms of interpretation. And so I think as we think about sustainability long term, I think that's that's a major challenge. You can work to kind of the highest levels as we are, for a period of time in a crisis. But so sustainability, I think, is kind of the biggest challenge here. And beyond that, I think what Councilor Mejia said beforehand about communicating in different, understanding how language is perceived in different cultures is just so important. I know my staff has a very attentive ear. The mayor has recognized that, and it's part of the reason that we're getting a strategic communications person on my team starting June 1st. And part of her goal will be to really work with our press team to make sure that we're communicating in the best way. And what I'd just say is that we welcome from the city council, as well as all the incredible community groups represented here today and residents, any feedback that you have, because it is a continual process of learning and improving that we are all committed to at the city of Boston.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusuf. And I have no further questions. Just looking forward to hearing the testimony from the panelists. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to ask our counselor, my colleagues, if you have any questions for Yusufine, to please raise your blue hand so I can recognize you. And if not, we can move on to the rest of our panels. Oh,
Councilor Janey is raising her
I
hand.
just can't get to my blue hand fast enough. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also have questions.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, please. This is called a public hearing. Everybody gets heard. President Janey, you now have the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And many thanks to the makers and all of the activists and advocates out here. I see my good friend, Ed. I didn't see him earlier from Grove Hall. Just some questions in terms of the administration. It would be helpful for me. I want to understand where language access works. I understand that it intersects various departments, and do each of those departments just figure out what the materials or processes should be translated, or does this more rest perhaps in your office, Yusufi? I would be interested in just what understanding the structure. And then I think beyond written materials, I want to affirm and echo the importance around the cultural proficiency, which I'm sure you understand and get. And just to use the chairwoman's example, I think it might have been in a hearing today on the elections that you talked about the write-in ballot, and that the instructions there in a different language say, write the name here. And it sounds like a directive versus an option to choose to write in someone there. And so I think that is one issue. And I thought that was the perfect example to really illustrate one of the points. It's not enough just to translate. There are different levels that we have to understand here. I think it's important to have the materials, but I also think the processes. And I know one of the earlier speakers mentioned ZBA. I know many of us have been pushing for the Cannabis Board to finally meet. We know BPDA meetings can be well attended. Certainly, while meeting through remotely and virtually may not be the ideal for engagement, I think it's important that we want to continue to bring folks in. And so those processes, whether we're talking about through a remote Zoom or even in person, I would be interested in understanding how much of it gets translated, what that process is. Is there a request that has to happen, etc.?
Yeah, great question, Counselor. And I really want to turn it over to my LCA colleagues here because I think they can walk you through a little bit about how that process works. I think just important to know in terms of my department, we are really an advocacy department. So if there is a common trend that not even a common trend, if there's even individual cases where there's a department that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you see that, raise it to us, and internally we'll, work it so that those issues get fixed. That's typically our role, but I'll turn it over to Eddie McGuire and our LCA team to answer the process and how it typically works.
How you doing, Council? This is Eddie McGuire, and thank you for having us on for the hearing. I just want to make it clear, Minar Swaby used to run this program as a director. She's no longer with the city, moved back to New York to be with family. And so we are in a transition period with the director, and we plan to get that information out soon. But with respect to how the office is formatted, it was based off the ordinance as stated earlier. And essentially the way it is we are like the centralized office. We do all the trainings for every office. Every single department in the city has an LCA liaison. The front-facing staff and all of those offices are trained as well. There are also language cards at each of those locations in case they aren't able to interpret what language it is. They can physically point it out. So there is an accommodations request form. So for each office and department is allocated a certain amount of funds that comes directly from LCA. So if it is an outreach form or something, say like a permit form at ISD, and they would like to translate that because it's, they changed the code and they need everyone to know what it is. Essentially what they would do is they would submit a request form saying that they want to get this translated by reaching out to a vendor first. There's certain qualifications, and then in that system, it will go to LCA. We will allocate the funds once we get the invoice. And we have a list of multiple vendors with that partner with the city, but as well as that are volunteers, as well as we had discussed earlier. So essentially what we're doing in this office is we're training everybody, trying to keep them up to date, and make sure that if they're interacting in any particular communities, there are standards that need to be met. There are certain translations that need to happen, like every abutters notice, will dictate as well from a demographic breakdown as to what we expect from a language access and accessibility standpoint. But I know Jennifer, who's on this call as well, does all the trainings as well as maintains the request forms. And Peter, who's on this call as well, does all the rapid translation as well as a few other things. And Guyana is on the call as well, as dealing with a lot of the social media aspects and reaching out on Haitian Creole things. So they'll all hear.
Thank you, Ed. I just want to be mindful of time. I apologize for cutting you off, and I want to just try to get a couple of other questions in. I see the chair giving the visual reminder here. I don't know if ONS is on the call, but certainly want to extend my appreciation to them around this.
I'm Jerome Smith's chief of staff, so I oversee that as well.
Oh, okay. So that's who you're speaking for. Great. Okay, great.
Yes, I'm speaking for the entire cabinet.
Excellent. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I want to say thank you. What would be helpful is just understanding around capacity. Do we feel like we have enough to do what we need to do, what we'd like to do, what we aspire to do? We are in our budget season. I want to be mindful that if there are resources that we, need, obviously on the council side, this is a big priority for us. And I'd be interested around capacity. So if anyone from the administration could speak to capacity in terms of staff, capacity in terms of how many languages we're getting out to, if we need additional resources. And then finally, Madam Chair, want to, just in case I don't get another round, want to go on record to publicly add to the chorus, thanking Central staff for the amazing work and their commitment in pulling this hearing off, but just their commitment around this issue, period. So just want to lift up Carrie and Julady and Juan and Candace and all the folks behind the scenes that make us look good, and for their work with this hearing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor President Janey. In the interest of time, though, I will have to say is that I'm going to move on to Councilor Edwards. And I'm hoping that when we ask the administration to respond, that if you could incorporate some of your answers to Councilor Janey's questions, that would be helpful. Thank you. Councilor Edwards, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much.
Chairwoman Mejia. I want to be very exact in my two questions. One, I think one of the unique positions that your office has, Yusufi, is to not only make sure that in front facing the city is as inclusive and is making sure that we have language access for all Bostonians, but also is in combating what I think is in too many offices, a culture of feeling that having to provide language access or language services is a burden. You know, it's an extra, it's an annoyance. And I feel that for far too many folks who are working in city government, it's an afterthought. And then it's like, oh no, that too. Or they assume it's better to just get something out, even if it is in English, to the exclusion of some people, because it's more convenient. So I'm curious about your efforts, your office's efforts in combating that cultural, I think it's a stigma about providing access. But before you answer that, and I understand Councilor or Chairwoman Mejia probably is looking for a collective answer after all of us ask our questions. I wanted to be direct to yourself, or more likely to the ONS office. On February 24th, the mayor came forward and announced, I was there with him when he announced the executive order for reforming the ZBA. As you know, I'd filed a hearing order to completely reform the entire system, as I felt that there was a lot of issues that needed to be reformed. Part of that executive order says, and I'll quote it, is that the Inspectional Services Department is instructed to work in conjunction with the Mayor's Office of Language and Communications Access to ensure the provision of translation services, including through assistive technology and/or staff, to ensure effective conveyance of technical discussions at board hearings, this is for the ZBA, within 45 days of this order. That means within 45 days of, I think it was from February 24th, so we're well beyond that. We were supposed to have and assure that people were having language access to ZBA hearings and technical language. And as we are coming up on now restarting those ZBA hearings, and this is, I guess, to Eddie McGuire and ONS, are we ready? Are we ready to have those technical conversations? Is that translation ready? Are we complying with the executive order? You could take it in either or the way, but I really need to know if we're ready and if we're complying with the executive order.
So we are working currently with ISD, and I know there are going to be more details with respect to that. But overall, I mean, anytime that we're trying to make, especially in the new atmosphere that we're going to be operating Zoning Board of Appeal in, there are a lot of conversations about what platform and how we're going to achieve all our goals. And so with respect to, you know, the finite details of where we'll be at, then, you know, I'll get that to you, but I don't have it on hand at this moment. But when it comes down to, we're all working toward making sure that we fulfill the executive order.
This is my first hearing that I'm also a co-sponsor, so I'm still figuring out the rules of engagement. But Edward, when you're talking about working towards, it would be helpful for me to understand what working towards looks like for you all and what the outcomes are and what's the accountability and timeline. I'm just curious now in terms of what working towards looks like.
Well, so it's identifying platforms with respect to making sure that it's accessible and equitable. I mean, it's going through looking at is it a webinar, is it Zoom? It also has to do with, you know, the scale and the operation, how we're going to make sure what is required per area. So the demographic breakdown. So there's a variety of different things that we're looking at. A lot of stuff that, you know, we're happy to work with the council on and continue to discuss. But the language access team itself, you know, is continuously striving to reach those goals. And with respect to ISD and the Zoning Board of Appeal, you know, the first dry run last night of a Zoning Board of Appeal hearing happened. You know, I think we're going to continue to work with our colleagues to make sure that this is continuing, but our standards are going to be, you know, based on, you know, the industry standards, and we're going to try to, you know, make sure that we're competent to those and exceed them when we can, and make sure that the resources that we have available are getting to everybody. So it's definitely on the top of our mind. It's conversations that are happening. There's an engagement group that's being held with a variety of different city departments from the BPDA, ISD, that occurs. I think it's weekly or every other day.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Ed. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to be clear for everybody. Goals are nice, but then the executive order is not a set of goals, it's a requirement. And it was owed in 45 days. And so we're beyond that 45 days. So right now, as I understand it, we're not in compliance with the executive order. And so I, again, appreciate the goals, and I understand that there are certain, we've had to adjust, but this, in terms of language access, is probably one of the low-hanging fruits in the ability to adjust and build an infrastructure for that, especially now. So again, just to emphasize, we're out of compliance with the executive order. And I apologize, Chairwoman Bach, I heard the, Chairwoman Mejia, I'm sorry, I've been in so many budget hearings, good Lord, come on, give me a break. We've done like 20 hours. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Mejia, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so tired too, but I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge, part of being accountable is acknowledging when we are compliant and not compliant with executive orders that we fought so hard to get done. I believe in that order. I think, I don't believe I don't know if translation was even tried last night at the ZBA hearing, but in as much as we're building up for the big ones on Tuesday, we need to be compliant by then. Apologize, Chairwoman Mejia.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate that passion, and I appreciate the line of questioning. So by all means, don't worry about it. I'm gonna go on to, just in the interest of making sure that we hear from all of our panelists. I don't see any other blue hands. I'm gonna ask my mentor and colleague, Suzanne Lee, who I sat with in the English Language Learner Task Force and who I've learned a lot from, and really grateful to have you here. So would love to give you an opportunity for your remarks. Oh, we can't hear you. We're gonna start from the top because we can't hear you. There we go.
Oh.
Okay, sorry about that.
Am I on now?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I have to get used to this title, to call you Chairwoman. Congratulations. And I want to really applaud all of you, all the counselors who are on this issue and stay all this time to really try to dig in to how we can do better. And it's signal of a different day in how we operate in our city. And I am so, after 45 years of advocating for full participation for our limited English speakers throughout the city, that we're finally getting to the stage of looking at, okay, what are the best practice? Let's look for ways to implement this. It's no longer acceptable just to translate. So it's a given that I expect every city, anything that's in English needs to be translated. That's the given, okay? I know we're not there yet, but to me, that's a given. In addition to that, if you really want to have full participation, I have 4 points here that I wanted to suggest, because in the interest of time, and after all, I've been doing this for 45 years. So with this pandemic, it really just highlight some of the issues that we've been talking about. And I remember just a few weeks ago when Tough Medical Center first set up a screening center using the Quincy Elementary School cafeteria. But they did not notify anyone in the community. And everybody was panicking. And they, in fact, I called some of you and said, what is going on? Because the neighborhood folks call me and say, okay, we see people moving things in and the clinic is moving out. So it turns out they had this plan for a week, but none of us knew it. So it caused unnecessary panic from a community. So it speaks to our cultures and how we value and how we look at the neighborhoods and our immigrant community. So I would suggest that in the future for anything from the city, that if community-based organization get a heads up before anything that is published, so that we are prepared to help with information sharing. So So that means it requires the city to give us information a day or two ahead, right? So that we can do our own translation and help our community to understand what's going on. And that's what it would be helpful to have information like that ahead of time. We have held 4 town halls in Cantonese and in Mandarin, and each time was 150 people. That's huge. And people call in, and the whole meeting was conducted in the native language, and we translate for English speakers. Now, normally when we call a meeting, sometimes you don't even get 100 people, never mind 150 people. And I want to thank my counselor at Flynn for participating in some of those town hall, because he wants to know what people are talking about, what they're thinking about, so how he can help. So having that kind of town hall in the native language is critical to getting our immigrant population to fully participate in a civic life and that their voice matter. So in order to do that, our community-based organization has to be healthy and strong and have the ability to do that kind of work. So it is critical for the city to figure out ways to support, to make sure that our community-based organization, in order for them to be full partner, we cannot just rely on people to be volunteering their time. Just like I heard somebody said it earlier, right? I mean, you're pulling people everywhere. And I've been volunteered to do this for 45 years. At a point where people didn't know that I was a teacher and a principal. That's my job. But all the stuff that I do in the community is my volunteer work. So we shouldn't, if we really want to have a robust and full participation, we have to really dig in and support our community-based organizations to make sure that they have the resources and be able to survive. Pay them if you ask them to be a partner to do something with the city so that they can pay their staff to do that. Otherwise, they won't be able to do this. We cannot ask community organizations to continuously volunteer that time, right? Thirdly, and I'm really happy about this, that it's a signal that we are finally at the stage that we value language and culture, and that we need to go further and develop that kind of capacity in all of our civic life. And the school can play such a critical role to help us develop that kind of capacity, that our education system are producing bilingual future workers, so they can be working in all sectors of the society, that we are not relying on just hiring somebody to do translation, because you have culturally and linguistically competent people in different departments. It makes a difference. And the last piece is that I want to urge you, all your counselors, if you want to have a really good meeting, hold them in the native language. And we might take a few more, but it is so important, because the questions that we get from those town halls that we conducted in Chinese, will give us a better understanding. Why are people not going to get tested? Why they have such a hard time? Almost nobody, I think we know of 2 people within the Chinese that even got their rent subsidy application in correctly. We don't know anybody have gotten those rent subsidy yet. So it's a huge issue. It's not a question of just translating, because by the time we help them to navigate, everything is already gone. So, but if we have those materials ahead of time, we know how to navigate, right? We know how to help people. But that, again, rely on, we have healthy and strong community partners like VET-A and numerous community-based partners. I'm going to stop here for your questions.
Thank you, Suzanne Lee. Really do appreciate you and all the work that you do for all of us. On behalf of all of our kids, our community, thank you. I did realize, in the interest of I can't claim being a newbie for too long because people will stop believing that I have yet to learn this, but I realized that there were 2 questions that were asked by Councilor Janey and Councilor Edwards that I did not give UCF an opportunity to respond to. So before we take any additional questions or comments on behalf of Suzanne Lee, I'd like to give UCF an opportunity to respond to those questions. Thank you, UCF, for bringing that to my attention.
Thanks so much, Councilor. And, you know, Councilor Edward, I think a great question around, which I really understood it as a culture change question, right? And the city of Boston is a huge organization, as you know, and there's, and it takes time. It takes time for different departments. I mean, just to be very transparent, to come on board. There are a couple of steps that, you know, our LCA team has taken, which I think have been really powerful. One is that we have LCA liaisons in every department with regular meetings. And secondly, we have staff trainings and funding available so that there's incentives for departments to participate and use best practices. It's not an overnight kind of thing that's going to happen, but I can just say that having witnessed the LCA department operate, they're using all kinds of carrots and sticks approaches to get folks moving in the right direction. And I think, you know, we've come a long way in the city towards that. So that's a very transparent and honest answer to your question. And then to Councilor Janey's question, probably Eddie's better position towards that. I know that we have put in a lot of resources during this crisis around LCA, and I know there's a little bit of an inventory that Eddie's doing. Eddie, do you want to speak to that very quickly? I think we lost him. But what I will say is that, Councilor Janey, to your question, right now the LCA is in a process where we're doing an analysis of all the costs that we have incurred, because they have been pretty substantial during this crisis, and the mayor's been very committed to making sure that there is language and communication access. So I think once that analysis happens, I think Eddie will be able to be in a much better position to come back with a sense of that.
Brief question to Chairwoman through the chair. I'm wondering if you would be willing to get a list of all the LCAs, the language access coordinators, excuse me, from each of the departments. And after this hearing, would you be willing to send that to all of us, you or Councilor Flynn, as the makers of this, the hearing order and the hearing?
Yeah, is that for me, or is that
it was a question.
We'll get it to you. You will absolutely get it to you.
But if you could provide it to the chairwoman, and
Yes.
and I assume that she would then provide it to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's why I was saying, yes, I would do. Yes, thank you. Tripping me all up today, Lydia. Okay, so I am going to ask if any of my other colleagues, I'm gonna ask my colleagues if they have any questions or comments directed towards our previous panelist, Suzanne Lee, by a show of blue hands. Seeing none. Thank you, Suzanne Lee. I'm gonna move on now, and I'm going to invite Ed. Are you still here with us, Ed? From Grove Hall. Oh, there you are, Ed, from Grove Hall Main Street. Gaskin, please. You can unmute yourself and join us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And so my name is Ed Gaskin. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Grove Hall Main Street. And I'll be reading my testimony, but I'll be summarizing it, but the full extent of my marks will be provided. And I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more from the business and economic perspective. So according to Kevin Hassett, the former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors and the current senior advisor to President Trump, the federal government has already provided $6 trillion of stimulus into the economy, and that does not include the amount provided by the Federal Reserve, which is easily another trillion. Another one of President Trump's advisors believes that the number is actually closer to $10 trillion. This, in fact, would be the largest transfer of wealth of all time. Except for the money that went for unemployment, the vast amount of that stimulus money went to large institutions. It's hard to imagine just how much $7 trillion is, but it's enough to pay for almost whatever you can imagine. Reparations for every African American at a cost of $1.4 trillion, enough to pay off student debt at $1.6 trillion, the first installment of the Green New Deal, single payer health for the next number of years, to shore up the entitlement systems of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Many economists believe that we are in the early stages of a depression, and as such, we were likely to see the largest destruction of wealth in the last 100 years. In the next year or two, we are likely to see our most vulnerable citizens lose what little wealth they've accumulated over their lifetime. The only ray of hope is this period of change will provide significant opportunities for wealth creation. The question is, will this body provide the type of policies and regulations that make it possible for all citizens to be able to take advantage of those opportunities? The language issue access has been important to myself as the executive director of the Greater Grove Hall Main Streets. I've always wanted the Office of Economic Development to actually put its website in another language besides English, because I felt that the citizens were contributing their tax dollars to the program, but they weren't able to get the resources from it. What people may not know is that almost every city department in the city of Boston provides some type of business, some type of services to small business, making them the largest provider of technical assistance to any other organization in the city. But either people don't know it or there's not have access to it. Even things as simple as having like a police officer come out to your place of business and doing a safety assessment. And we have sort of the small ways that we've tried to demonstrate our interest in the language access is, for instance, we have 110 banners that are on the light poles, and they're in English and Spanish. And what a better way to say to the community that you're welcome by it's saying you're welcome. We have Spanish-speaking volunteers that actually go out to the places of business to help them fill out the forms, because still most of the forms that you have to fill out for the assistance from the city is still in English. When the mayor rolled out the restaurant grading system, we actually got a person from ISD who was Spanish speaking that would actually go to the place of the restaurants so we could explain the program to them one-on-one in their language at their place of business. We created a document for the employers to know their rights, because a lot of our small business owners were afraid that they might be raided at any time when the Trump had all the stuff about deportations.
Ed,
Yes.
I'm sorry, if you could slow down just a little bit for our interpreters, they really are trying to keep up, but
I apologize. I was so concerned about my time.
I know, don't worry, Ed. I'm gonna give you an extra time just to make up for that. But I just want to make sure that people who are following along can understand what you're saying.
I appreciate that, Counselor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I recently testified about the language access issue at the City Council hearing chaired by the current City Council President Kim Janey, and provided those recommendations, and those are also part of my document. In the early stages of the COVID thing, we produced a newsletter that said, "Small Business Owners, What You Should Know About COVID." And we basically had 10 very specific things about how to clean and run your business in this context. We actually sent the request to have it translated to a number of the city councilors, but unfortunately, we didn't hear back from anybody, but we did hear back from Chang Diaz's office, who translated it for us. But the problem was, by that time, the city had already shut down all non-essential businesses. We, as a director, we kept seeing all these resources that were being made available to businesses, whether it was on the city, state, or federal level. But again, they were only in English. So if you look at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts COVID-19 Business Resource and Guidance page, it's only in English. You look at the City of Boston's Economic Development Update on COVID, only in English. Other lists from ICIC, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, only in English. Grant applications came out from everybody from like Verizon, which had a $7.5 million one, Spanx, $5 million. All of those were only in English. So the city undoubtedly would point out to the fact that their small business relief program had the information translated in multiple languages, and they had the ability for you to apply in multiple languages. Where we ran into the problem is that it was almost impossible to pass out flyers to store owners when all the businesses are closed. So you can imagine that you have the governor telling people not to go out and the mayor telling people not to go out. And I'm supposed to distribute these flyers to the businesses to tell them about the small business relief fund. And beyond that, what they didn't do is there was no way to there was no like subject line or body of the email. So if I was going to try to email it to my businesses, I still had to get a translator anyway, which wasn't provided, because I know I certainly wouldn't read an email that was in another language and then click on the attachment and hope that that was in a language that I could read. But I was just so determined that I wanted the people in my community to be able to have opportunities to get this grant money, that in one situation, what I did is I had one of the business owners who was bilingual try to call the other Spanish-speaking businesses to let them know about the program.
So you're almost wrapping up.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Now I'm giving you the time crunch, but that doesn't mean that you're going to speak faster, okay? Just get yourself and get through.
I am going to wrap up. I will just say that that the same type of problem and the federal level, but what we did, there was a small group of us, and Carlos was one of us, that we actually had worked out an agreement with 5 banks that would take up to 500 applications, and we did the actual outreach, the technical assistance, and then got the applications submitted to the bank. And so again, if you look at the extent of my documents, you'll see the actual track record on that. So anyway, so I thought that the Mass Equity PPP Access Initiative was one of the bright spots. And so it was this new initiative that's called the Boston Small Business Strong. And I guess in my closing remarks, I'd say what happens in terms of the businesses reopening, access to opportunity is in the hands of this body and most diverse city council in the city's history, and administration has a number of people of color in senior positions that could influence how the city works with businesses of color, such as the Chief of Economic Development, Director of Small Business, Civic Engagement, Resiliency, Director of Equity and Inclusion, among others. But it should probably not come to any surprise that a city that does less than 1% of its goods and services for minority businesses would not be leading in helping small businesses owned by people of color. The future of this minority city depends on what this body and administration does in helping all of its citizens capitalizing on the opportunities before us.
Wow, I'm gonna need a translator just for all that, Ed. You go a mile a minute over there. No, but thank you for your passion, thank you for your testimony, and thank you for all of the great recommendations and things that you have lifted up in terms of what we can do differently. Really looking forward to your partnership throughout this journey, and I know we have a lot of work to do, and appreciate you bringing these issues to the forefront. I'm gonna ask my colleagues in the order that I have listed here for questions and comments. I'm gonna go first to Councilor Flynn from District 2. You now have the floor.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Ed, for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I'm just curious, by a show of blue hands, if any of my colleagues have any questions? All of the in favor say nay? No, I'm just checking. We're having a little, okay. President Council, Janie has her hand up, so I'm gonna go to President Council Janie.
No, just wanted to offer my thanks as well. I know how hard Ed works in the Grove Hall Main Streets. I know from my work with him, language access and how the businesses, the diverse business owners throughout that commercial district and how they interface with the city is very important to him. So I appreciate his strong advocacy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, President Council Janie. I see in the chat that Councilor Campbell, followed by Councilor Braden. Okay, Councilor Campbell.
I don't have questions. Some of them I can submit to the administration. I have to jump for another call, but I did want to thank Ed for the work he's doing, and specifically in this time of which it's relevant to this hearing, ensuring that guidance and manuals and things that are created out of that Main Streets have been translated, and also looking for more resources, but being intentional there. I also want to thank Suzanne too for participating in just the concrete suggestions on what we could do better. And of course, all of the other advocates as well and the administration. But I did want to lift up a couple of points that Councillor Edwards made. And if we had more time, I would have just asked my questions, but I have to jump sadly. And I think complimented by you, Councilor Mejia, in that, you know, this is my 5th year on the council, and we've been talking about some of these issues and the importance of access, co-creation, in order to co-create with residents, how we have to be culturally competent, how we have to sort of expand the table to allow residents to meaningfully participate in creating solutions to the problems we all face, and also to defining those problems, right? And to figure out where we should begin. It has to be informed by constituents. And so I share the frustration of some of my colleagues when the timelines continue to either be pushed back or there's very little detail as to what to expect. My chief of staff, who everyone knows is a Latina, could not be on the hearing, but she sent me some questions, and it had to do with timeline and when things will happen and when will we start to sort of coordinate and be a little bit more intentional, especially through ONS, on our community meetings, on all the things we do in the community, that it be in different languages. And so I just wanted to lift up some of those frustrations that are shared by me and my team members, and hope that this hearing is sort of a renewed opportunity for us in the midst of COVID-19, and given how essential it is that we connect to these communities who are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, that this be a new opportunity for us to move a little faster. So I will submit questions. Thank you, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Flynn. And also with respect to the list of the LCAs, if we could all get that, UCP, that would be wonderful. Thank you, guys. And thank you to all of the advocates and the organizers who participated. And thank you to all of my colleagues on the council who continue to push on these important issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councilor Braden, you now have the floor. And you're on mute.
Unmute now. Okay, got it. Sorry about that. I'm outside, so there'll be a lot of noise behind me. Yeah, I'm just curious about what's required for a language group to get translation services. You know, if there's a particular issue in a local neighborhood that has maybe a language minority group like Somali or Russian, is there a process that you can get language translation or support to deliver a particular information? I know when we were talking about the health information, the public health information, I had to advocate really strongly to get Russian. It wasn't thought about. I also had to advocate really strongly to get Portuguese. It wasn't thought about. It wasn't on the list, the menu of languages that were on the go-to list. So I just wondered what's the threshold or what's required to get a language group to get translation services. Thank you.
So is that question, Councilor Breeden, is that question to the administration? Anyone in particular? Yusufi or Edward? And I know that Suzanne Lee had just mentioned to us via chat that she is going to have to be leaving soon because she's going to go to a community meeting. So I just wanted to say thank you for participating in all of the amazing recommendations that you've made. Our hope is to hold ourselves accountable to that and work alongside you to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. So
question for the administration, perhaps?
Yep. Edward or Yusufi, anyone want to
jump in? You know, let me, I think it's probably best for the LCA team to step in on that. And then I'll just say one thing right after the LCA team goes. Eddie or any of the LCA liaisons, you guys want to step in on how that works?
Are you saying requesting the translate? I got a little lost in the question itself. So are you saying if a community group would want to request a translator, or what dictates the threshold for translation? Because if someone reaches out now,
Is there a mechanism, say you're in a local area where there's a significant linguistic minority in the neighborhood that you need to reach? Is there a mechanism to get translation support in that situation?
we use the demographic breakdown that comes from census data that we've collected through the city and other agencies to dictate kind of general standards. Now, if there was in advance to a public hearing or something of that kind where we're identified a group, we would make sure that the appropriate translation teams would be there. So, for example, you know, if they were to go into Chinatown, it would be Chinese, Cantonese, you know, Chinese languages, Mandarin, Cantonese, and things of that kind. So yes, they can request those. It's just a matter of making sure that in the process of whoever is setting up, they contact the office, and we will either direct them to, you know, like state partners or external partners or internal partners to ensure that they are able to try to get that access. But it isn't something that can just happen immediately. It is, you know, it is a request. It has to be considered in the planning, just as everyone has mentioned. But yes,
So
we're able.
What's the timeline for a request to get you know, do you need 3 days or 2 weeks or how long?
It really depends on the content, counselor. How long the meeting would be. So, and it's something that we really need to, you know, that we try to reiterate to everybody throughout the city is that, you know, there is, you know, quality as well as Giuseppe had mentioned earlier. You know, it's quality of the content, and this all does take time, and the time wise could depend on what the vendor's workload is to what our volunteer workload is. So the sooner we're able to know about this, you know, the quicker we're able to turn it around. But there are a variety of different variables that do take into place. It's not something, unfortunately, you know, that is set up where it's a turnaround can be within minutes. So the text, you know, the rapid text support is happening within like a 5-hour turnaround, especially for us. So
I really liked Suzanne Lee's suggestion of identifying community-based organizations and giving them a heads up about things, so that if you send the materials in advance, they can translate or definitely do some groundwork and preparation for a meeting if it's an important issue in the neighborhood, that folks don't come in cold and have to to understand things in an unusual.
Yeah, and I know we're actually using, and I think Peter could highlight some I know we'll do this specifically for the text, but we have independent vendors that are from the communities that we are currently utilizing to get information out. So I don't know, Peter, if you want to highlight any information about that on there, but our resources with respect to some of the outside groups that we work with.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. So I just want to say thank you to the council. My name is Peter O'Donnell, and I am the Community Outreach and Engagement Fellow with the Language and Communications Access Department here at the City of Boston. So council person Liz, to sort of give you a background, each request that comes in, so I could give you an example specifically as it relates to languages that aren't necessarily widely spoken or necessarily widely accounted for in the city. The Boston Public Health Commission and their fact sheet about COVID, we had that translated in the top 10 languages, and we fielded requests specifically as it related to Albanian, Khmer, and Farsi. And so the way that this works is that people, community members, community organizations, even people internally within the city of Boston can see these documents that are coming out related specifically, let's say, to COVID, and go to that specific department that is publishing the material and say, we need this in a language that has not been identified just yet. In terms of the thresholds as well, each community has their own either 5% of the LOTE or community members that speak a language other than English, or it's over 1,000. So whatever one meets that threshold is automatically seen as, you know, for East Boston, it would be Spanish and Arabic. And so within that, there's a process as it relates to the community. In terms of how it relates to, we want to reiterate that as a department, the Language Communications Access, that we have, sort of two sides. We have an internal side that works with departments to ensure that there's quality and there's control. And we also have an outreach side to where we're going into the community and we're sort of learning more about the language access and communication needs within the city. So we're working on that. Obviously, COVID has led to some really unexpected surprises within that, but we are trying to work our best through that. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank
Counselor,
you.
if I may-
I'll wrap it up. Is there anyone else? I'm watching the time, so thank you, Chair Mejia.
Yes. I am the chair of this situation here. You guys all better. No,
Counselor, can I just step in to just respond with
You
one
know
thing
what?
real quick?
I'm going to let you real quick.
All right, 30 seconds. So just one thing I just wanted to, I know that Suzanne Lee, who's fabulous, and Counselor, you mentioned about giving folks a heads up. Precisely because of that, we established the Health Inequities Task Force. We do regular calls with the faith communities, actually a number of different sector communities, because that heads up to the community and engagement of the community is really important to the mayor and the administration. So that's one piece. The other piece I do want you to know is that ONS staff is probably one of the most diverse staff in the city of Boston. I mean, in terms of the departments, and I think that's a credit to Chief Smith, to Eddie, and really to the mayor. And the reason for that diversity is because we're actually hoping that at the point of contact with our residents, that a lot of actually cultural sensitivity and translation is happening. And then just the last piece I do want to highlight and put in perspective for people is that we are in the middle of a crisis here in terms of coronavirus. So, you know, I totally appreciate how we want things to be done with speed, always done in the right way. And trust me, we all want that. But just know that, you know, because we are moving at 100 miles per hour, trying to respond to the public health crisis, sometimes particular things are missed. So I just asked the council to have that perspective when it comes to, you know, whether it's heads up on the hospital that Suzanne mentioned or the ZBA piece, etc. Thank you. Sorry about that, Councilor. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I appreciate that. I also just want to say that for me, in my role, my hope is that this conversation moves beyond COVID-19. And what we're really looking at here is doing a deeper dive in terms of just language access in general. So I'm not coming into this conversation just thinking that it's COVID-19. I just want to make sure that we're building the infrastructure so that we can have sustainable ways that we're engaging immigrant communities and communicating with them in ways that are going to help them move out of poverty, right? Whether it be through socioeconomic status, whether it be in education, all of these issues are interconnected. So this for me is really important, and for us to recognize that I didn't come into this with just COVID-19 in mind. And the fact that we're hosting this hearing in multiple languages, it's about building the infrastructure for real meaningful community engagement. And I think that if we could do this during these times, my hope is that we'll continue to do this at all times, because that is what people expect from us. And so I just want to really be clear that we're doing this hearing so that we can identify these issues, and then through this process, be able to provide whatever resources are needed so that you and the different departments can be more successful. So I want you to know that I definitely understand the urgency in which you all are trying to move in, and appreciate it. I'm going to go on to Lydia Edwards. Councillor Edwards, just send me a note. I want to give, it's hard for me to see all the little hands, and I'm not sure if anyone else, any of my other colleagues have their hands up and want to say anything, but wanted to give Councillor Edwards an opportunity if she wanted to say any closing remarks to do so. And you could go off mute. Go off mute.
Oh, okay. I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you so much. I was just about to go. I really appreciate your leadership again. Congratulations on making history. I think a second or third time, I'm sure, Councilor Mejia, and many times you will. Councilor Flynn, thank you again for your leadership. To the panelists who also have testified, your perspectives were vital. Because we didn't have questions doesn't mean you didn't educate us, okay? Just know that. Sometimes you drop so much knowledge, we have to go back and break it down for ourselves. I want to thank the administration for coming out. I do believe there's a genuine, true want to make sure that this is an inclusive city. And we're here with you to make sure that that comes to fruition. What I would love to learn more of is how much more money you need to do that, to hire the folks, to either pay the stipends. That we're in budget season, and I will look through the budget, but I hope that you're not shy about expressing your needs. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I echo those sentiments, and also some of our advocates and our panelists who spoke here today really informed our thinking in terms of what are some of the areas outside of. I'm looking also, we didn't have anyone here from the Office of Economic Development to address us in these concerns. And I think a lot of the issues that Ed raised through the Grove Hall Main Streets really speaks to the amount of work that needs to be done across all departments. So I'm going to ask my colleagues if you all don't have any other questions or I'd like to just move to closing remarks. And I'm going to go to in the order of that I choose, because I'm the chair and I don't have a list in front of me. So I'm just going to go with who I see right now. And if I'm breaking protocol, please forgive me. I'm going to go to my co-sponsor first. First, do I have any blue hands? No, I'm going to go to my co-sponsor, Ed Council. City Councilor Ed Flynn, for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you for your incredible work on this hearing and in your longtime leadership on language access and civil rights issues. I also wanted to acknowledge a friend of ours who was on the meeting but couldn't stay. She had another appointment. Is Vanessa Calderon, the executive director at EBA, who also does tremendous work in advocating for our immigrant community across Boston. So we're proud of Vanessa and her commitment to social and economic justice and language access. I want to say thank you to my colleagues for their tremendous questions and leadership on this issue, and the mayor's team that are doing very good work as well. It's about working together. So I want to say thank you to the mayor's team that's on this call, but also doing work behind the scenes, and someone that hasn't been mentioned who does a lot of great work. And I work with them, as we all do almost every day, is Marty Martinez. He does a lot of great work in the city on language access issues as well. As I mentioned earlier, I have four. As I mentioned earlier, I have four women of color on my staff, and that speak languages other than English. And I couldn't effectively do my job and represent my constituents if I didn't have a dedicated staff that's committed to the residents of my district and the city. I also want to acknowledge the tremendous role of City Council Central staff as well. This is the first time this type of hearing is taking place, and we couldn't communicate effectively if it wasn't for the central staff team. So thank you to everyone behind the scenes that are working so hard in representing so many people in the city. At times their voices aren't heard. So I want to thank central staff. Thank you to the panelists for always being there advocating for language access, even when it's especially difficult. I especially enjoyed hearing Ed's story. He really had to take the initiative to work extra hard in making sure people could understand and get the information about COVID-19. So thank you, Ed. And that's what it takes sometimes. It's all of us getting out of our comfort zone and doing tasks that we're not used to. And it's a lot of hard work, as you know, and it's constantly communicating with people. So again, I want to say thank you to Councilor Mejia, all my colleagues in the City Council. I want to say thank you to the mayor's team that's on this call as well. We appreciate your great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm not seeing any other blue hands. I'll just close.
Liz Braden.
Oh, her hand's up? Okay. Counselor Braden, you now have the floor. I could not see your blue hands. And
No, I didn't know I had a blue hand. Which one is it?
Oh, wait, okay, I see hands up. I am so sorry. I've noticed where the blue hands are living and they're not in where I normally, okay. Counselor Breeden, followed by Counselor Janey and then Counselor Bach.
I'll just make it really brief. Thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. Thank you, Councillor Mejia. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. This has been a very useful and valuable hearing. And thank you to all the panelists and all the folks who participated. And also thank you to central staff. I know they're working very hard in this very busy season of budget season, and we're here doing a lot of extra hearings. So we really appreciate all your support and help. As you said, Councillor Mejia, I really hope that this is the beginning of a conversation that we can continue after post-COVID. You know, we're laying some groundwork, we're building some infrastructure in this moment of crisis. And I hope that going forward that infrastructure isn't going to disappear, but will continue to build. And I also want to thank the folks at the Department of Language and Communication Access folks for all the great work that they're doing. They're doing stellar work. And I really appreciate all their efforts to increase accessibility in the city, but we've still a ways to go. So thank you so much and have a great weekend, everyone. I have to get off and go to another meeting now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Breeden. I'm gonna call President Council Councilor Janey. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. Thank you for chairing this very powerful hearing, and thank you for your leadership being a lead sponsor. Thank you to Councilor Flynn for your steadfast leadership in this space and leadership with this hearing as well. Many thanks to all who testified, participated, the administration. I agree with you. This has to be an ongoing conversation. This can't be about COVID-19. We have a lot more work to do in terms of making sure that everyone has access to information and services in our city, regardless of what language they may speak. I'm grateful for the work that's underway, but we've got a lot more work to do. I think this hearing, great next step. Looking forward to following this up. And again, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Council Janey. I would like to now recognize Councilor Bach. You're a tough act to follow, but you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've done an amazing job. I just want to, again, thank everybody for participating today and say, you know, it's been referenced a few times in the last few minutes, the connection here to the budget. And I would just encourage everyone, we've actually asked for sort of language access resources from every department as part of our request for information. So I would encourage everybody to scrutinize those. And I definitely think that thinking about how we get sufficient language access resources across our city departments should be a priority for both the council and the administration. Because if you don't pay for it, it doesn't happen, to Suzanne's point. So, you know, very excited to continue that work. And again, just want to thank everybody for sharing your wisdom today. Thanks so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. And if I don't see any other hands up, I just wanted to just close by thanking the panelists, the public testimony, as well as the administration. It was a great showing. It speaks a lot to your commitment to this conversation, to have so many different representatives from the mayor's office. So I'm deeply appreciative for that. As someone who is an English language learner, who's an immigrant, who grew up in this city of Boston, nothing gave me greater joy than being able to convene this conversation around equity and recognizing that the work begins not after this conversation, but the work has already started, and it's our responsibility to not just to move beyond the dialogue and put some muscle behind this and walk out of this conversation with a real clear mandate that we can continue to do business as usual, and that if we bring all stakeholders to the table, And that's what real policy making looks like. And I think that today's conversation really lends itself for that, that we can hold ourselves accountable to the people. So, and I would be remiss if I did not say again, a thank you to Central staff for an amazing first historic hearing that we had to do also virtually. I mean, we're just, well, you are, Central staff are doing an amazing job at holding us down, but more importantly, this hearing being translated in so many different languages speaks volumes to your commitment and making sure that everybody is heard and all means all. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to my staff. I would be remiss if I did not give a special shout out to Jacob Dibelcourt, who is my policy director, who has been working really hard at making sure that we have the right people in these spaces to amplify all of our voices. So thank you to Jacob and my entire team for their hard work and dedication and making sure that everybody gets heard. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I gotta wait. Don't worry. My official, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
So much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Congrats.
Yes, congrats to all of us. This was great.
Great job, Counselor.
Great job, Carrie. We did it.
Carrie.
Yay! Yay! Oh, we're
Teamwork.
so daily. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yes, Carrie. Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.